Welcome back to another episode of Just a Dude podcast, where we dive into the extraordinary lives of everyday heroes. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we've got a story that's as gripping as any thriller you've ever read. We're talking about a man who's not just survived the battlefield, but mastered the art of storytelling to bring the world closer to the truths hidden in plain sight. So buckle up, because this episode is going to take you from the front lines to the forefront of media innovation. Let's get into it. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a guest whose journey from military intelligence to media maverick is nothing short of cinematic. Meet Pete Turner, the executive producer and host of the Break It Down show, or BIDS for short. Pete has over 70 months of military experience under his belt, with over 1,000 combat patrols shaping him into a master of counterintelligence across continents from Afghanistan to Iraq. But that's just the beginning. Pete has turned his razor-sharp insights into a podcast that's approaching its 10th anniversary with over 1,500 episodes under its belt. He's interviewed Nobel Prize winners, athletes, and shadowy experts, especially on topics like the Ukraine-Russia conflict, offering perspectives you won't find on your typical news channel. Beyond the mic, Pete is a warrior for charity, helping veterans like himself navigate the challenges of PTSD in memory of his brother Eric. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Pete Turner to Just a Dude podcast. Pete, welcome to the show. Anything you'd like the audience to know about yourself?
I dig doing this. I love talking for a living. It's fantastic. I can't wait to be on your show, man. And just start off my conversation. I'm already vibing good. I'm so excited, man. I love that we get to live in this world where we get to do these things.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome that, people from all over the country, even the world. I mean, I released an episode today with a gentleman that's in Australia. So, it's pretty amazing what technology can do and how it can bring different people together with different backgrounds. But, I'm excited to learn about your story. So if it's okay with you, Pete, I'd like to go a little bit in your background. And if you could just tell everybody a little bit about your military service and what you've done with that.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to get in the Army. And then I did. I became a counterintelligence agent. And it's remarkable. Like when I think, like if someone reads my bio that I push out, I'm like, what in the heck? Who is that person? Because it was just such a different journey for me. There's so many journeys in life when you look back. Like I could have been the person that stayed here and then got that next job, and but I chose to not do that. And so you have all these branches. So I'll go to Fort Huachuca, which is where the spy school is for the Army, and I think, man, there's a reality where I end up living here and stay, and it would be a good reality. I had great options, but I chose to not do that. And so I think about all these different choices that I made to get to where I'm at, and led to this really incredible life. Look, I've had a lot of trouble, still have a lot of trouble. Life is still hard, but I've also had all of these amazing, I call it fortunate moments, where like I had the fortune of being misfortunate enough to have to leave an Army post every day and go talk to locals and expose myself to harm. And that is part of the bad part of it, right? Yeah, dealing with that. But also in there is a ton of blessings and great, wonderful experiences. And so my job is, when I was a counterintelligence agent, was to help. It's really four things, right? It's like to help the commander win more, help the commander lose less, help the enemy lose more, and help the enemy win less. And so if I can wrap all those things in one piece of information, man, I'm killing it. Like that's the gold standard. And so I got really good at that. And because I went out a lot, over 1,000 combat missions. And when you do anything 1,000 times, especially as complex as
that
spying,
is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you learn how to do the job great. And a lot of people in my field don't get to stay in the field as long as I did, because they get promoted and they move away from the tactical part of it. Because the tactical part's hard. No one wants to do that. They want to go to embassies.
Exactly.
And, go to salsa night and drink cocktails. But I just kept going out, and I got really, really good at combat collection, to the point where, like, look, I'm not saying I'm the greatest person in the world, but there's nobody better at combat collection than me, And so it's, to be able to say that in a field as complex and as broad and as hard as spying, it's pretty remarkable.
And Pete, how long were you in the military in your counterintelligence roles?
So I was in the Army 3 different times, and all of them have counterintelligence stuff in it. And so, and in 3 different ways too. So I was in the regular Army, the reserve, and then the Department of the Army as a civilian. And all the time I did the same basic, for the most part, I did the same basic job every single time. And so that's, with contract time, I would say right around 18 years of just dedicated time in the field doing things.
Yeah, that is a career. The last time I checked, almost 20 years that's the way to do it, right, Pete?
Yeah.
So, but that took you all over the world too, right?
Yeah, a lot of
In your
places.
engagements, and so where all did you travel as far as your time in the military?
The bulk of it is Iraq. That's where I spent most of my time, right? But I also deployed to Bosnia and I deployed to Egypt and I deployed to Afghanistan. And there's some other smaller, like more singular kind of missions that are in that mix. But these are the things that I did that really defined the person I became. These specific four missions, those four countries, Bosnia, Egypt, Iraq, and then Afghanistan. That's just the crux of what I did. I worked in Germany and all that too, but
Yeah,
really when I was great at this, it was later the Afghanistan, Iraq stuff that really I had learned all my lessons
you'd
and
honed your
started
skill,
doing
right?
things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, because just like anything else, right? I have to assume that counterintelligence is just like any other trade, right? Where
Sure.
you have
Yeah.
to learn different things and then you have to find ways to make it work for yourself so that
Yeah.
you could get
Yeah.
that information. And then, so how has that transitioned you into, because you run your own show, your own podcast show. So how has that transitioned into podcasting for you?
Not gently. It's
I mean, I have to
hard.
assume there's things that you can't really talk about, right? I'm sure there's things that are still classified,
Yeah,
but
yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's a lot less dramatic than that. Yeah, there's things that I can't, and you would never know what they were because I won't talk about them. But
right.
most of what I did was very immediate, right? And so even if it lasted 2 weeks as being classified, it was so perishable. And even like I can say, like I was with this unit with this commander in that place at that time. Right now, today, that wouldn't be none of that would be classified, right? Maybe it's
Right.
sensitive and people would
Mhm.
be upset about it, but it's not classified. There's things called a mad minute, right? So I walk up to you and I go through this security, and you see it in movies all the time. Like, hey, we're going to have a meetings, everything coast is clear. Yeah, coast is clear. We do a little bona fides, like, the hawk flies at midnight. Yeah, I saw
Mhm.
the sparrow at noon, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, the fact that there's a mad minute, that's not classified. But what's classified is the words that you say. The hawk flies at midnight. Yeah, the sparrow flies at noon. A lampshade in the window, like as a signal.
Yeah.
Like those are the things that are classified because they're pertinent to that one meeting that we're going to have, right? As soon as you
Yeah.
have that meeting, not
It's
classified
done.
anymore.
Pretty much
Right.
done, right?
Now, maybe that dossier is classified for a while, but even that, like if we're not meeting anymore and it's been 10 years, that's not classified. That's old.
Yeah.
No one,
So
that
your
doesn't compromise anything.
counterintelligence was more like real time, right? Where
Real time.
you're doing things for your combat units to get them the information they need so that they
Right.
can successfully go out and complete their missions, right?
Exactly. Yes. Right. Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
that's got to be different. So how did you do that? Because obviously, I'm sure you had to go out and talk with locals and people in the region. How are you able to speak different languages, or did you have to work through a translator, or how did that?
Yeah, there's a couple good questions in there too. So let's just start with that. So I don't speak any other language really proficiently. I have capacity in a lot of languages, but not to where like I could run my meetings, right? So I need an interpreter. What I did become great at is working with an interpreter. It's another area where like I rose above my peers and I'm like, you give me that guy, I don't care. I'll get him trained up so he can help me. And so I would spend a lot of time developing that relationship with me and my interpreters so that when we went out, we were one. And
Yeah.
because usually what we do in the military in general, it's hard to find any place that trains people on how to work with interpreters. And then are the thoughts professional grade, right? Or are these just people
Right.
that say obvious things? Like, no, no, no. Like, what are the steps? What are the programs? Like to become a journeyman at this, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
how do you get to major league level? Like, you can't just say just do this. No, no, no. There's detail and there's complexity. It's like a high school diploma versus a master's degree. Like,
Right.
yes, it's the same thing, but I'm working at this level and you haven't even done the work to be professional, right? So,
Exactly. And yeah, and you're more specialized as you get to that higher level as well.
right, right, right. So you get past the point of translation. Of course, there's translation. More importantly, like, oh my gosh, you're Islamic and I'm taking you out and I'm working you during these times when it doesn't work with your religion or the food you're exposed to. I've got to now make sure I'm accounting for your well being. I've got to make sure. So, like,
Right.
when you're an interpreter, even if, like, let's say that the interpreter lives in Oklahoma City, right? And they've lived there for 30 years and they have a green card. And so they deploy in service of the Americans. They live in America. They're huge fans of the Sooners. But because they're brown and because they look Arabic, they'll get treated differently on the American camp, even though they're more
Mm.
American than the person who was born there and is 22 years old,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm a Cowboys fan, motherfucker. Oh, can we swear? I'm a
Yeah, go
Cowboys
ahead.
fan, you know? And so, and that's the ones who were like American, right? I'm doing American because they're not all 100% American, but a lot of them are. Okay, so you get a person who's basically an American. They've been there for longer than almost everybody in this camp has been alive. And we will treat that person poorly. So I would tell my interpreters, I don't care who it is that you talk to, always do what they say, but ask them their name, ask them what their unit they're in, and then I'll go back you up. And my
Yeah.
interpreters didn't get treated like that, so they wouldn't trust it. And especially like the foreign-born ones who were actually from Morocco and everything. I'm like, no one can tell you that you can't do something without having to deal with me afterwards. So do what they say. If they say don't go to the chow hall, just come get me. I'll come over there, and then
Yeah. You take
I'll
care
take
of
care
it.
of business, right? And
Yeah.
I bring them along so they can see me go bite some asses. And I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
this guy
Yeah.
goes out
Right.
with me every day. This guy leaves the wire every day. If he needs to eat, you feed him just like you do me. He's got the cart, you know. And look, my guys got to do their job to maintain security posture, but I would fight for these guys. If they were local, the first thing I would do when I picked them up and they like really got trained up is I'd go to their contract office and I'd say, hey, I need to get this guy a raise. And nobody ever did that. Like
Yeah.
all these, like you have an employee, right? Someone who's working with you, and it's an exceptionally dangerous job. We're leaving the camp every day. It's physically demanding. It's mentally demanding. It's dangerous as hell. I go to get I'm going to get you paid. And then they're like, what are you talking about? Like, you need a raise. How much do you make? I make $250 a month. All right, let's go. So we go over to the contract office. I'd be like, hey, I need to get this guy a raise. He's at this number. How much can we get him? And they would say, how about this? And they didn't care because
Yeah.
that just gets billed out to the government.
Yeah, exactly. And as we all have seen lately, the government just loves handing out money anyways.
Yeah, they're going to give it out, right? And by the way,
Exactly.
the contract company's going to make more money too. They're like, yeah, that's a higher level dude.
Because it's a percentage, right? Exactly.
Right.
I'm sure they get a percentage of whatever the contractors are paid, and that's how they make their money. So the more the contractor gets paid, the more they get paid.
Now, so here's the master's level stuff. Now ask any other veteran who ever worked with an interpreter, ask them if they ever got their interpreter promotion or raise.
Yeah, and I've never even heard money brought up from even some of my friends that, have been overseas, in Iraq, Afghanistan, after 9/11. They've worked with interpreters, but I've never once heard them say, oh, yeah, and we went and got them more money. So you're the first for that, Pete, for sure.
Yeah.
But you know what? You realize the value there of someone's, in country.
And what I'm asking of them.
Yeah, and I have to assume that even for you, you're probably, even though if it's an interpreter who's been in the U.S. for 30 years, you're probably going to have a little more trust with them than maybe somebody in country, right? I mean, not to say that you won't, but there's always probably just that little sub thought that, hey, maybe this guy may not be 100% truthful, right? As opposed to maybe like an American who lives here in America, loves it.
Yeah.
You might be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to trust him maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, so this is where like that master's degree level stuff comes in. Like that is a very good like assumption, right? That's a good place to start. And then you come and you see me and I'm like, well, of course you have to trust this person because they've got to communicate for you across cultural boundaries, across religious boundaries in a dangerous place. Relentless boss, me, right? And they don't have to work as hard as I do, but they got to work hard. And so all of these things go into that. Like they have to trust me. I have to build trust with them. Now it's on me. That's my person. That's my mission. I've got to make sure that they're being honest, right? So I'm checking them and I'm doing certain things, but I have to trust them. They have to know that I trust them and that, because when I like, hey, we're going to go off the camp and we're going to go do this, their life is in my hands. And so like one time, one of the interpreters like, Pete, but there is war over there. And I'm like, well, that's our job.
Yeah.
And that if you think we shouldn't go, you're going to have to tell me what else we're going to do that day. Because if there's war over there and it's dangerous, we don't get to take that day off. That's the place we need to find. And I would tell them, we need to find the meanest, nastiest people in the world. Do we have to do that every day? No, we can go talk to some elders. We can go talk to some governors. Do you want to set a meeting up? And they're like, no, we must go where there is war. And so they understood our mission and how hard it was and how dangerous it was. They understood that I cared about them and trusted them, whether they were local or they were, an American with a green card. They understood that that was the task. And by the way, if you don't want to go out, you don't have to, but you can't work with me anymore. So there's no pressure here. You'll absolutely keep your job, but you're not going to have this job. And a lot of these guys wanted to leave the camp. They wanted to do, and they knew what we were doing was important. And here's the thing, because I trusted them, I would let them do a ton of talking. And they would elevate their game. They'd be like, Pete, give me a minute. And then they would talk to them and they would get something like, okay, here's what he's saying. And he would explain the whole thing to me. And they would trigger on something that I couldn't trigger on because they know the language, they know the culture.
And the culture,
and then they would teach
exactly.
Me. Right. But that requires trust. And trust is whether I'm talking to a local or an interpreter, it's all trust. And if I don't have trust, if I don't build that, if I don't test it to make sure it's real, it doesn't matter if that person's got a green card or is a citizen, they also can be doing things that are bad. So you always have
Yeah.
to have trust. You have to build it. You have to test it. You have to, lean on it to see how strong it is. You don't just get to assume that you have trust. So of course you have to be professional about that, but you have to do the job the way I did, you have to trade in trust and you have to be good at that. So you don't get to say, I don't trust somebody, because that is the static default answer. Is like, make sure you don't trust your interpreter and treat them
Yeah.
like crap as you talk to them. Like, no, we're not doing that. And so
Yeah, that's
that's
almost what you see in all these, war films, modern day war films. Like, they don't trust the interpreters, or they're shady, or this or that,
right.
and
Right.
that's why I asked
Yeah.
that question. Here
Sure.
you are, Pete. You've worked with these folks, and they're in
Yes.
country, and but I would hope that probably most of these people can see that what your mission is in that area is to probably make their lives a little better, and that's probably why they come on board, right?
Yeah, they all have like some kind of idealistic thing that you're trying to deal with. And by the way, some of that sometimes inhibits the mission. So I've got to figure out where they're at religiously. Now, most people, everybody didn't get. It's like, imagine going out with Catholics and you're going to go talk to a bunch of Protestants. Can they handle that? Yeah, it's no big deal. Like that's not that big. Okay, so great, but some people can't. And so sometimes I get an interpreter and I'm like, hey, this guy won't work for me. I need somebody else. I don't need the best. I just need someone I can train up.
Yeah.
But this guy, like, we had a young kid and he's like, I don't want to go outside every day. And I'm like, well, you have to if you want to work with us. And he's like, I don't want to go outside every day. I'm like, you don't have to say it again. Let's go back to the bullpen and you can go sit down. And he was glad to do nothing, right? I don't want that
Yeah,
guy.
that's
I
definitely
want a
not the
guy
guy you want.
right. Because I look, we work hard. When I'm deployed, it's 20 hours, 16 hours, 36-hour days. And now they don't work that whole time, but when it's
Yeah.
time to go work, they do. So here's Pete's rule, right? Like, if I can get off the camp, I've got unique skills and they're going to give me unique access. I've got to come through. Like, that is when I'm in the batter's box on the playing field, right? And so
Yeah.
I need that person primed up. So rest up, get ready. Also, go talk to your friends who are interpreters. Listen to whatever phone calls they got. Talk to me about who we need to be talking to, because they're a second set of eyes and ears once they understand what I'm
Right.
doing. And now my little one-person machine is now a two-person machine. And while they're resting and chilling and playing dominoes and I'm writing reports, they're still gathering things and guiding me on how I'm going to use our time, because we only get so much time. So when the boss comes and the boss is like, hey, Pete, we're going to go on patrol. We go on patrol and come back. Woo, 6 hours. I'm exhausted. And my buddy's exhausted. And then the lieutenant comes up and goes, hey, Pete, we're going to go on a patrol. I got to put a dip in, drink an energy drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell
Get
Mohammed,
going.
I'm like, get your ass in gear. We're going back out. Back out today. Yeah, well, that's why you
Yep.
rested yesterday. We're going back out.
Exactly.
Because that's the rules, right? Yeah.
And I mean, in the military, it's not like things are always time sensitive too. So it's not like you could just say, well, we'll do that tomorrow or we'll do that Wednesday.
Yeah.
No, if someone comes
Yeah.
up to you and says, hey, Pete, I need you to go out on patrol with us or this mission, you can't just sit there and say, well, you know what? We just did 6 hours. So maybe you could find someone else. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
And you could say, oh man, I got too much work as it is. You could say that, and it would be true. But that's not what I would do. I'd be like, I get to go back out in the field. I have a chance to expose myself to this harm, to find out what's going on and maybe save someone's. Yeah, absolutely. I can't get enough at bats, and so I would just write a longer report or another report. Like, yeah, I'll be up for 3 days in a row trying to get caught up on this. But yes, I'm doing this back-to-back patrol. And we did them all the time.
Yeah, because you have to do whatever the mission calls for, and you have to be available for that, and that's part of the job. And it's like, I know a little bit about that because I was a cop for 13 years, and I know all those times where you sit there and the shift's over, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go home, and you get that bad call. Next thing you know, like you said, 20 hours later, you're finally going home.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, and so what a 36-hour day is. You're like, no, today's Tuesday still for me. I haven't got to start Wednesday yet.
Yeah, what do you mean? I haven't
Wednesday's
even taken off the belt yet. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I haven't taken off this uniform in 3 days, and exactly, exactly what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you pull over that drunk guy 30 minutes before the end of your shift. Well,
yes, and
you're
now
not done for hours.
Exactly, and that's just the paperwork.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. And so I have paperwork too, right? Everything I do.
So even though you go on patrol, now you got to do the paperwork afterwards.
Yes, because everything can become a case, a legal case. It's a record. I've got to write a report. I've got to decide what it all means. And so, I do something. I've got to annotate. There's no intelligence if you don't bring information in. There's no information if you don't record it.
Exactly.
So I've got to write all this stuff down. It's the same thing as you guys.
Yep. Exactly. And that's the thing, you have to document those things for legal reasons, for, to look back on before to see maybe who you talked to. Cause I'm sure in your line of work, you're going to sit there and say, hey, you know what? We
Sure.
talked to this guy and we got some good information. Maybe we'll go back and talk to him again. Maybe he's got more info. Right. Because that's
Yeah.
what you want to
Right.
do. You
Right.
want to keep building relationships, get more information,
Yeah.
because the more
Yeah.
information you have, the safer your guys could be on their missions.
So check this out. So this is, and because you're, a former cop and everything, you'll probably get this. I didn't belong to the unit that I went to, right? I would be someone who augmented what they did. So whether it was, and it could be a bunch of different units in the same place. So imagine like I'm working in a city with a bunch of precincts and I
Hmm.
show up, right? So no one knows who, but you guys have internal affairs. I'm an internal affairs guy and I show up. I'm like, I'm not here to harm anybody. Everybody's going to look at me cross-eyed. Who are you? Why are you here?
Exactly.
What are you looking into? I swear to God, I'm not focused on anything internal. I'm doing external stuff. You're going to see me off the book. They're not going to trust me. So
They're
I've
still
got to
going to give you that
spend,
side eye. Yeah.
right, I got to spend about half my time building trust with the local units. And so that so the big units would love me, right? Like they get it right away. Here comes Pete. He's pumping out reports. Nobody else is getting us this information. It's amazing, right? Like, why don't you go help the SEALs? And I'm like, I will. Am I invited? And they're like, what do you mean invited? Of course, you just go out there. And I'm like, no, no,
No.
no. Yeah. So now, okay, so let's put it in your terms. So Precinct 13's like, hey, we got a SWAT team here. We want you to go in bed with those guys and help them.
Hmm.
Am I invited? Yeah, of course. Go over there. Yeah. Are they expecting me? No. Just go over there and introduce yourself. Like,
It's like, no, no,
now
no.
we got a problem. Now we got a
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. So yes, I will go over there, but someone who's their boss needs to be like, Pete, you're here, and I will make sure that you don't get messed with. Otherwise, it's a waste of my time and it's a waste of their
Yeah.
time. So
Exactly.
there's
Because
a
they're going to
lot
be
of
like, why is
that.
he here? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And once they see me work, it won't be a problem. But they don't want me taking up a space in the patrol. They don't want me on their truck. They don't want me sitting, and I don't need to sit in some kind of sniper perch during a bank negotiation. Like I need to
Right.
get down at a coffee shop and they've got to trust me that I can peel off and I'm not going to be a problem for them. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that's harder than building trust with the interpreters.
Oh, I could believe it, because these are people that have probably been together for some time, right? They're in a unit
Yes.
together, so they know the
Right.
guy to their right, they know the guy to their left, they know
Yep.
how their tactics work, and then all of a sudden here comes Pete, right? And they're like, all right, what do we know about Pete?
Yeah.
Exactly, right? I mean, that's
Can I,
probably what
can I
you have
make
to
it
go
worse?
through. And yeah,
Let me make it
exactly.
worse. Okay. So you do your shift brief, right?
Hmm.
And my work starts to leak into it because the chief is like, hey, Pete's work is good. We need to know these can help keep us alive and help us win more and lose less. And so I start bringing bad news because there is a lot of problems. And
Hmm.
now here comes all this. Pete found this out. Pete found this out. Pete found this out. And it's bad. It's reflecting bad on cop behavior. I'm not looking at
Yeah.
internal affairs, but I'm like, if we're supposed to be doing this and creating this outcome, it ain't happening. So like, I'll give you
Yeah.
an example from my world. There's a briefing slide. Today, the civil affairs people are going to go out and they're going to do a program to paint the mosque. And that's going to make people love the government because the people of Afghanistan don't know they have a government. I'm like, I'll bite. All right, let me go check that out because I know that that's not going to happen. So I go ahead of time and I talk to the locals in the area. I'm like, what's the government do around here? And they laugh in my face and then they laughed in my face. What's the last thing the government did? Like, can you name anything? And then like, no. And I'm like, oh, come on. We've been here a long time helping these guys. Like, oh, you guys? No. Here's what you guys have done. And I'm like, go ahead. And then make a list. And I'm like, And so then I go pull the slides out from the old units because the unit here, they don't know what the old unit did. And so I pull all the slides out and so I'll show the command and be like, the last 5 units have done the thing that you're talking about doing. Let's do that thing. But here's a stack of slides. What are we going to do different? And they look at me and they're like, if I give it to the right person, right? If I give it to the ops chief, if I give it to an army lieutenant who's lower ranking, if I give it to him, he'll spit in my face and tell me I don't know anything. And I'm like, but I do know things. I just handed you 5 lessons from the last 5 years of this specific mission. Why are we doing it again? What was the result? Did these guys get a result? Is it good that we're doing it again? Is it bad? I have 100 questions, don't you? And then like, no, but the ops boss, right? He's like, yeah, I see what you're doing. Okay, let's go do it. You tell us what you think. So I go afterwards and I go back out and I'm like, hey, we just painted this mosque. What do you guys think? And they're like, yeah, it looks nice. Why'd you do that? We painted that 2 years ago. It looked fine. And so
Exactly.
that's losing less right there. So like we lost, let's do less of that. And so the boss is like, Yeah, if we're going to paint something, let's send Pete out there and see if they need it, want it painted. Like, what do they want, Pete?
Yeah, exactly. What if we paint something they want to leave it original, right? And then we go out there and paint it. And now
Anything,
that would be a
anything,
big
right?
that
Yeah. And so that now I got a tasking from the boss. So the chief is like, what do you think, Pete? And I'm like, listen, it's not my job to think. The staff and everything else, I'll go ask questions and I'll give us some information, but I don't tell you what to, And they're like, no, tell me what you. So they always want more from me when I'm doing, because I'm giving them things they don't have. They want to put it to work. And so I'm like, let me go out and see what I can find out. And I'll tell you what the people think. And they're like, that I dig. And so then they come back and they're like, we don't need you to paint stuff. What we want are, and then we just have this whole list of things. And
Yep.
I'm like, why don't we just do some of that? And this is sound crazy, but we would never, so we would have a local governor in whatever area we went to, right? And we were so sure of the problems and the answers. We would never just sit down with that governor. And it took me a long time to learn this. This is not being Pete, like I knew everything. I had to make this mistake 100 times. But I realized if you went and sat down with those governors, they had a direction they wanted to go. And if we allowed them to be governors, they would give you a vision of the future. Maybe it's unattainable because that happens in politics, but it's completely unattainable if we dominate the entire conversation of relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we're there to be a partner, right? We're not there to be, the driving force, so to speak. But yeah, in these different countries, we're supposed to be a partner with their government to work through things and help them. And you know what's funny, Pete, is I do the same thing in the job that I work now. I'm basically, for most people not understanding what a scrum master is, I'm like a project manager for IT. So, and that's one of the things that I do is say, what work are we going to do? Is it going to derive actual value to the customer? Right. And that's the same thing for you, is you're like, we're going to go do this work and we can make assumptions all day. But if we're not providing value to the customer, in this case, right, the locals, then what's the point of doing it?
Yeah.
Right. We're wasting resources and time on things that are not going to make a difference. So let's put those resources and time into something that's actually going to make a difference here with these folks.
Right. Slow down, get more elegant, get more accurate, do less, do it better. And let the mission guide you. Don't let your goals, because we don't know what the goals should be. And so what I learned is all these units would come in with the same playbook. And I'm like, ease up on the playbook. That's why I bring those stack of slides out. And I'm like, we've done this, or like a question they would love to ask me is, how many schools are in the area? Like I was a genius and would know all this stuff. And I'm like, why don't we already know that? I mean, I'll go find out. I'm going to go ask the governor and he'll tell me. What you should be asking is, who are the teachers? What's the lesson plan? Who built it? Are the kids studying? Are they getting? You're asking the wrong questions, man. Like this is 10 years in. How many times have we built a school in this valley? Would you like me to find that out? Because you're not going to like that news. I'll tell you. And I would tell the like, you don't want me to find that out because that's not going to go well for you. And they're
exactly.
And as you how much the commanders trusted me, they're like, you know what? Yeah, don't go find that out. Because they had deployed as lieutenants, they had deployed as captains, they had deployed as majors, and they're like, oh yeah, you know what? I've built a lot of schools in my time, and so they knew, and they're like, yeah, don't go find that out. That doesn't help us. It's not that we're afraid of the news, but that doesn't we know we screwed that up. And the commander now knows that we know that we screwed it up. And so he's like, yeah, let's not do that. What should we be doing? Right. And I'm like, let me go talk to the other bosses. And the smartest thing I learned in the whole thing was we had this governor in Afghanistan who was willing to govern, but we had this very negative perception of him. One of the negative perceptions was like, oh, he's tied to the Taliban. Guess what? This is Taliban country. So
who isn't?
Yeah,
exactly. Who isn't there, right?
Right. Yeah. And so that dude, who's also a religious leader, like he would run the mosque in his area, right? So he's a former Mujahideen guy who fought Russians. So he's a hard ass. He's a religious guy who can use religion to his advantage to govern. And by the way, the government of Afghanistan at the time was called the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. So it's in the goddamn title. And he was a governor and a very seasoned governor. And so I listened to him, like followed his plan, and I brought it to the boss. And the governor said this to me. He's like, Pete, there's only room for one sword in the scabbard. Write that down in my book, take that to the boss and be like, he says there's only room for one sword in the scabbard. And so he wants to know who's the sword. And he's like, well, tell him it's him. And I'm like, well, we got to act like it. And he's like, absolutely. But because we were simpatico. So now I go back to the governor. I'm like, all right, it's your show. You tell us what you want us to do. I'll help guide you. You have another person here to partner with you, and we will be in sync with what you want to do. So I would ask him, like a governor, I would go, I'd love to observe that event. Do you mind if I go? Or is that too much? And if he said, I don't want you to go, you know what I would do? I wouldn't go. I would stay home.
You're building that trust.
Right. And so I would let him be the boss. And he knew that I respected him and what he's got the hard job. He's got to stay when we leave and govern this
Right.
place that has no budget, no roads. And so I'm like, what do you need from us? And so he did things. Here's what he did. We were so remote, right? That even the Americans couldn't really reliably drive out there. Every now and then, like once a deployment, they would drive out like, oh man, the trucks barely made it because these roads
Right.
break vehicles. And so we got airdropped supplies. And so these parachute pallets would drop in. Well, we would just take all of the waste, the cardboard, the parachutes, the pallet, and we just burn it.
Mhm.
He's like, don't burn that stuff. Give it to me. I can govern with that. And I'm like, you can't. Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let me watch. And he's like, yeah, you totally watch. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call in. And then he would tell me what he's like, I'm going to call in this farmer. Here's what I'm going to call him in. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer him these parachutes because I know they want them. And these parachutes they're disposable to us. Like they're nothing.
Yeah.
They're not like
Right.
you don't want to jump out of an airplane with them. They're not for people at
Yeah,
all.
exactly.
And so we learned how he governed because cardboard equal power. Power in terms of energy, like you can burn it. They didn't have trees, right? So they would burn cardboard. And so we gave him the ability to have something because he didn't have a budget. The money wouldn't reliably show up. And if it did, it didn't matter out there because they weren't in a money world.
Yeah,
They were more in an
exactly.
exchange world. Yeah. That's all the
Yeah, they're
stuff
not.
and that doesn't sound like spying, but it is because I'm looking over the hill going, don't talk about money over there, boss. Yeah, it's dangerous over here, but here's what they actually want to worry about. And then I get, and so
Yeah.
you have to build the trust to do that. You have to expose yourself to harm to do that. You have to do all of those things to do my job. That's how I do it. There's other ways to do it, but that's how I do it. And that allows other people to tell me, hey, Pete, you're a good dude. Here's what I want to tell you. Don't go downtown today. Why? Just don't go downtown. Can't tell me anything more than that? Can't tell you anything more than that. Okay, cool. What time? So
Yeah,
I ask the
exactly.
questions and then I hand that over to one of my peers because I want them to have a win. And I'm like, here, take this win. There's a report. Even if it doesn't happen, they're getting a report about a potential, and you don't know how that report will fit in with something else. And so even if nothing happens and you're proving a negative, it doesn't matter because a piece of information came in. I give the win to that soldier because I got the commander's attention. I'm doing everything I need for him. I'm directly communicating with the commander and the governor, and I'm funneling information through to both those guys. And so if I can give that sergeant a win on something threat related, I don't need the win because that's his job. So I then become this depot of information from a lot of different sources. Hey, you got to meet so-and-so. And that's the Army guy or it's the Afghan guy. And they're introducing me to people. And I'm building my influence because I have a lot of information. And so in my world, if I can become a critical node for that unit so they can operate better and more lose less, then by default, the enemy loses more and wins less. And we start to make progress even when we can't see it. And then I try to go out and find those unseeable wins. I'm like, by the way, the governor threw a party. I wasn't invited, wasn't even allowed to go. Neither were you. But you know what? 150 people showed up. Well, why is that a win? Well, they were farmers he had never talked to before from his area. And so on and on and on and on, right? And so then the boss was like, we won last time. Like, we won. And it sounds dumb, but these things matter when you're trying to stand up a government. If you can't make the government appear for the people, then there is no government.
There is no government, right? It's like a shadow government. It doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
In that sense, not a shadow government is a government running behind it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you can't,
sometimes the shadow governor is the governor. Let's be right about this, right?
Yeah,
because these guys got to survive. They're like, I
Yeah.
got chickens, and you're going to pay this man. It's like, wait, what? Like, no, I do illegal stuff all the time. I'm part warlord too, and I'm like, you're part warlord. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, you got to be a warlord around here to survive. Otherwise, they think you're soft. So I'll kill someone if I have to. You do, and I don't care about. Like, that's not my business, right? So
that's a different culture too.
Right.
So it's not like here in the U.S. where we would say that's absolutely ridiculous. But in war, especially the Middle East, I'm sure that's probably not the exception, but more the rule, right? Being a warlord / governor. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough times over there. I mean, it's just a totally different environment, especially for our folks, and I don't think people understand that. And I know I've talked to some of my friends that were in the military and, like I said, spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they just come back and say, what you think of a third world country, it's worse. This is what they told me, and they said just, some places are nice, like if you're in, one of the big cities in Iraq and stuff like that. But in the outskirts, they said it's just, you would not believe it. Just breaks your heart to see how these folks live.
Yeah, it's different. And if I'm going to be a little critical of like that kind of a sentiment, it means that we didn't do our job prepping these guys when they deployed, because there's a ton of beauty in how these people live and what they do and how, but we're incapable of seeing it at a rate that we need to. If we're going to have a professional license to go impact someone's life like that, we have to be better prepared when we get there. So that, yes, there is things that makes you sad and breaks your heart. There are always going to be those things. But the day to day, you need to not learn all about their culture. You need to learn about how to learn about culture so that when you get, and I'll give you an example. So, and I know these lessons, but I do them publicly so that my peers can see that. And so I would say to someone, I'm like, I'm from California. You guys know me. I'm Pete. And I'm talking to the Iraqis in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I eat with my left hand, but I'm told that I'm not supposed to do that around you guys. And they're like, Pete, and they talk with their mouth open and food coming out. They eat with their hands. They're all kinds of gross, right?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, so that's what they tell me. I'm not supposed to eat with my left hand. It's not weird. I don't know. What do you guys think? And then they'll say something like, Pete, you're not from around here. We know you do things differently than us. You're an American. You're from California. We love you. You eat however you want. You're a guest in our house. It doesn't bother us. So I just took what we thought was a negative cultural thing, and it is, right? But I flipped it because I wasn't afraid of offending someone. I was curious, even though I know the answer, but I know the answer because I was curious from before. And
now,
the
fact that you weren't afraid to ask the question, which
right.
is great, because how do we learn if we don't, how do we find these things out if we don't ask?
Right. So again, it doesn't seem like spying, but I just taught everybody American in that side of the room how to work with culture because we don't ever learn these lessons when we deploy. And so instead of being afraid, like, so here's a great example. Anytime I can get booze in a combat zone, I love it because it's a KPI for me of success.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's Ramadan and I'm sitting next to my boss. He's a colonel. He runs about 1,000 people, right? And we're talking to his peer, and that guy's also a colonel. And so it's my turn to talk, and I'm like, it's Ramadan, and I got my canteen here, which I don't normally bring, but I brought it for a possibility of bringing this up. And I'm like, and I want to drink water, but I don't want to drink water in front of you because I'm told that that's bad. I know all the answers to this because I've done this trick before. And then the colonel's like, it's Ramadan. You're right. Want some whiskey? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I want whiskey. Opens his desk drawer. He's like, you can have all the water you want, or you can have some whiskey. And I'm like, I'm going to come get some whiskey. He's like, well, I'm going to have some with you. During Ramadan, an Iraqi colonel on duty drank whiskey with me in front of my boss, right? And so my boss was like, all right. Yeah, so he's learning too, right? So my job is not just combat, like, is there going to be a bomb, but how do I make my boss better at partnering? And how do I get them to see the things I've seen? And that's all part of that winning more. Like, oh, I can win more here, And so, look, I don't care if the boss drinks whiskey or not, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the point is that it's possible during Ramadan to be offered whiskey by an Iraqi. It's like, come on. And so it's not about drinking, it's not about getting drunk. It's about the lesson, the exchange of that. And so now to that dude's like, Pete's a cool dude. He gets it.
Yep. Yeah. And I like that because you're not only, like you said, counterintelligence, getting stuff for it, but you're actually, it just seems like you're training people how to correctly interact with the local folks and how to use them as, I don't want to say friend, but like an asset. Right. That these people are assets to you. Treat them like, human beings within their culture. Here's some information that I can give you. Oh, by the way, you'll probably learn something if you listen to me. Right. Because you're doing things for a reason to help teach others and show them through, different examples instead of just saying, do this, 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 and this. You're actually letting them learn on their own.
I was always trying to amplify what I did, right? And so, because if I go out and write reports that no one reads, that doesn't do anybody any good. So if I write reports that matter and I'm starting to influence the unit, that's good. What else can I do? Well, I can teach these lessons in a way that allows them to mentor their people and teach them. And look, I made all kinds of mistakes doing all this stuff. I got kicked off the camps. People hated me, all that kind of stuff, right? But the people that got it, the people who are in charge are like, I need Pete. They would, if they were ever going to deploy and they had the ability to, they would absolutely grab me and put me on their team because they know that I was going to focus on keeping their guys alive, make them better, make their time worth more. And by the way, also like get the enemy to acknowledge that we were there and that we weren't that much of a problem, because that's part of my thing too, is how do I deflate their anger towards us?
Exactly.
You can't always do it and you can't always prove it, but so when I was in Afghanistan, this is at the peak of my powers, right? And I'm about to be done doing all this stuff, but the Taliban call a meeting. I don't know this. This is in the blind to me. So the Taliban goes to the governor like, hey, we want you to bring Pete, my buddy Rich. Bring Pete and Rich out. We want to meet those guys, because they're people are talking about them in town. And so we go to this farmer's house a little bit off our camp, and no anything. We're just there with the governor, so we're safe with him.
Mhm.
And we have this meeting with all these farmers. I don't even know what's going on. I'm just listening because that's my job. Just observe. Okay, I'll observe. There's nothing for me to do. So I'm just letting my interpreter listen. And he's like, it's just a meeting with farmers, that's all kind of thing. And they're talking sometimes about you, sometimes about you. And so we go through this whole process, and I'm like, all right, nothing, not every well you drop a bucket into gets you a lot of, so there's nothing really there. And I got
Right.
plenty to write about. So I don't think anything of it. And the governor calls me back, maybe later that night, maybe the next day. And he's like, you know what happened today? And I'm like, no. What happened? And he's
Tell
like,
me.
that meeting we went to at Bob's house was called by the Taliban, and they wanted to meet you and Rich and decide what they were going to do about you. And I'm like, well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, because you were sitting there, right? At the time, you probably didn't know that. You're just like, this is
Unaware.
just farmers.
Completely, right?
And
my
now you're going, shit, yeah.
yeah, my partner had set this up. And so I'm like, okay. And he's like, they like you guys. They know that you're respectful. They know that you're scholars. You have good beards. So you're all right. You guys can operate in this area. So that's how good I am at building trust. Was I built trust enough that my governor knew he could talk and take care of this for me, bring me back in, because he wouldn't have let them harm me, right? And he said so. He said as much. He's like, look, I was never going to let them do anything to you, but I wanted to see what they would say. And he was curious, right? And it worked out. And he's like, I'm so glad I did, because now we don't have to worry about it. You guys are going to be safe in this valley. And we were done being in that valley at that point, but either way.
And you're like, that would have been great, months ago, but right.
But I hadn't earned it. I hadn't earned it.
Yeah.
Right. I had to earn that meeting. And so it's a shame that I wasn't able to say, well, let me stay and see what I can do. But your time is up, and your time is up.
Yeah, your time's up. Your time's up. Exactly.
My time was up.
So
yeah.
Wow, it's amazing that you have all these, just these experiences and working with different folks. So I could definitely see now, as we transition into your podcast, how you transition to a podcast, especially with the Break It Down show, right? And that's what the name of your show is, BIDS, BIDS.
Yeah, Break It Down show. Yeah, BIDS. Yeah, the Break It Down show.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because I mean, it does seem like just the title, the Break It Down, is essentially what you were doing in Afghanistan and Iraq and everything, right? You're breaking down, what do we need to do? What do we need to find out? So
I love the title of the show. I got to admit it. I love it. I'm like, I can't believe that this all became this thing. And I started, I'm actually at his house. My buddy John and I started the show together. It's really my show now, but he's always like, he's a co-founder. He's welcome. I always try to get him to come on. But the show has grown into my thing, and it's a lot of it. It's just spy work, just reconstituted into this show form. So I reach out to people. I do conversations with them. It's like a patrol, right? And then the actual show is like a patrol report. Look, I know how to interview people because I've done it. Look, you know how this is. You go interact with people. Maybe you see them at their worst, maybe you see them at their best, but you're interacting with these people all the time. You just get better and better. You can get better and better and better at it if you choose to. In my line of work, it was required. So I did. And now I'm,
and mine too, looking back now, I know why I'm getting into podcasts. I had to talk with people from all kinds of different backgrounds, usually at their worst, sometimes at their best, but I was always that type of person, kind of like, where I could relate to your stories, Pete, about, you being in the military. I was that type of person that even if I had to arrest you today, let's, whatever it is, I'm going to see, you're probably going to be out of jail tomorrow because that's the way the justice system works today. But when I see you tomorrow, I'm not going to hold a grudge. I was doing a job. You had a bad day. I'm going to see you on the street. I'm going to stop and talk to you. And most of the people were like that. And I feel like, that's something that you probably did. There may have been people you didn't like talking to, but you'd go and talk to them and have good, cordial conversations to get the information you needed. So I definitely get that, because talking to people and interviewing with folks, and not even interviewing, but just having a good conversation is kind of a skill that you have to learn.
It is. Yeah, it is. And everybody thinks they know it better than they do. But until you really get into like the details of what that looks like, because you coming across the kid who's maybe up to a little bit of mischief and being the right kind of cop in that time, in that conversation, that's different than the guy who just uses force and imposition of will.
Exactly. And I worked with a lot of cops like that. And let me tell you, they were my least favorite.
Man,
because when people come in and we just say, they get people what we call assed up, they just come in with an attitude, and it's like, why are you starting at 1,000 when they're not even yelling at you yet?
Right.
Yeah.
Man, so my brother and I were driving. It was like a Friday afternoon. We're getting done doing some work, and we got rear-ended. Not bad, but rear-ended by a guy. And so we kind of drove over, and he's hammered. This guy is drunk as hell. And so while my brother talks to him, because they're looking at his truck, he's got a work truck, so they bent bumpers a little bit, not that big of a deal, but you still got to do the job. So I run over and I call the police. Hey, we were hit. The guy's drunk for sure. Here's where we are. And so they come over, and the cop that responds comes over, and he's trying to sort it all out. And I understand all this stuff. I'm keeping my hands out where you can see him. And he's like, well, I need your ID. And I'm like, my ID? No. I wasn't driving. I'm not the drunk guy. I'm not the guy you need to talk to. He's like, well, I need to have your ID for the report. And I'm like, yeah, but again, I'm not the guy. I'm the guy that called you. So just go talk to the guy who's drunk. And he's like, no, but I need your ID for the report. And I'm like, listen, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you. But if you run my license, it means and he's like, no, I'm not going to run your license. I'm like, if you lie to me, I'm going to be pissed. And the guy lied to my face, and he ran me. And I don't care that you ran me, but he should have said, you know what, I'm going to go talk to the drunk guy. That's what he should have did, because I wasn't the problem. I wasn't even driving the damn car, And so he, instead, in front of my face, he ran my license. And I'm like, see, look, wow, this is a problem. And I know you don't understand this, but you just compromised the integrity of every cop in this force. Because now I can't trust any of you guys, because you
literally just lied to me. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I understand it's procedure, but you don't need my license.
But he should have explained that to you. He should have said, hey, Mr. Turner, I realized that you weren't but because of the accident report, we have to list every passenger in the vehicle. It's for insurance reasons. The state makes us do it, blah, 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 But he should have just given you some information and say, or, hey, it's policy. Anytime we come up with somebody, we have to run them. That's what he could have said.
And I can say to them, I don't care about your policy. I can make myself anonymous. And you know what? I'll never call you guys again. How about that?
Yeah, that was not a good experience.
Right. Yeah. Sure. And even thinking about it makes me upset, because I don't care about me. I care about them and how they interact with other people. It's like, oh, you're the guy that called me? Oh, cool. I appreciate it. I'll come back and talk to you in a little bit. Let me go talk to the drunk guy.
Yeah, exactly. Deal with the bigger issue instead of
don't turn me into a issue. Let me be a win. This guy called, because look, we could have not called.
You could have just said, hey, you know what? It was a little bit of damage, no big deal. We're on our way. But now you've got on your conscience that you just let a drunk drive away.
Yeah. And when I call, I'm already putting a guy in jail, like my call is going to ruin this guy's Friday, And so I've already made the decision to call and ruin this guy's Friday, but you're going to make me regret it?
Exactly. Exactly.
So this goes into my spy world stuff, where like you have opportunities to engage the populace. A lot of it's the worst day of their life. Like if we got hit 20% harder, it would be even worse day, and you just made it worse by, I can't even rely on you.
I never understand why people, even in that case, using that as an example, why not just tell the truth, and say, hey, like I just said, hey, it's our policy, or, hey, I need it for the accident report.
Right.
But again, like we said, if he hasn't dealt with the drunk yet, the person that's been drinking, that should be a first priority.
Yeah.
If he's really drunk, you need to ascertain that first, deal with your arrest, then you could do your report later,
Yeah. And by the way, if I don't give it to you and you're saying it's policy, is it the law or is it policy?
Exactly.
The law. Well, then you need to show me the law, because I don't think that's the law.
I don't. From what I remember here, and I'm in Ohio, right, Pete? But laws differ by states. But from here, there's no. I think I'm not even sure that it's required. I think it's required for us to get your information for a traffic accident report, but we don't necessarily need your ID. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like your name and date of birth's fine.
And what I was led to believe was he was going to write down my information for his report. And he ran me, and I'm like, no, that's the wrong thing. He should have,
or at least he could have. If he told you no, he could have at least gone back to his cruiser and did it in there, so you didn't know. I mean, I hate to say that. Not to,
whatever.
But
fine.
But
right? Like run it later
in front of you.
Yeah, whatever.
It's basically like he just came up and said, "Hey, Pete, I'm Officer Liar. let me start lying to you right off the bat."
Yeah, and I didn't have any reason to worry about him running my name, and
no,
it wasn't going to be a problem, but his approach for the whole thing was, from what I understand about combat and conflict and talking to people, I'm like, there was no need to do that. And don't tell me you're bound by a policy when we're out here on the street, because you have agency and you can decide to not arrest somebody. Oh, you know what?
Absolutely.
I looked into it. Not going to arrest that guy. So don't tell me that you have to have my ID, because you don't.
Yep,
so
definitely discretionary. Yeah.
Right. And it's a simple win. It's a simple win to take. Like, oh, you know what? You're right. I don't need your ID. And if I do you mind? How about I get your number? And if I need something, can I call you later?
Exactly.
I don't want to be. it's Friday. I want you to get out of here fast. Here, if I need you, I'll call you, but I'm not going to need you. Don't worry about that. Man, I would love that guy. I'd be like, yeah, because I'd be all about that guy. But the guys who want to impose will, no matter what, and that's their default, and they don't have the tools to be better cops than that. Maybe the guy's a new cop. I don't know. But
Yeah, could have been. But
same thing when you go on patrol, right? Like you have a bunch of people who aren't patrol savvy. They know how to be warriors. They know how to like, I'm going to put my gun in your face and kill like that. That's someone's mom. Don't shoot the mom. Calm down, chill out. Let's figure out the best pathway to make this place less full of crime, less full of danger. And that's my lesson with all that stuff is like, how do you take your opportunity to be in that space? Like just default to officer friendly until you can always be more powerful as a cop. You can always, the one entity that can take someone's freedom away in an instant. So why not just start with officer friendly? Like, no, you're not going to bamboozle me, but I'm glad to be the guy that you want to talk to. So tell me what's going on, but
well, and you know what, when I used to do field training, when I'd train new officers, I'd always tell them, listen, the level you start at, you can't really back down from there. So if you start at asshole, you're probably going to stay there because people are going to, their defense mechanism's going to kick in. Hey, this guy's being a jerk, so I'm going to be a jerk to him as well. What goes around comes around is the kind of thing. So I'd always tell new officers to say, listen, if you're going to talk with somebody, there's no reason to start off the bat. I said, even if it's somebody we deal with every single day of the week, treat them like you want to be treated at first. Let them set the tone, and go from there.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this stuff's easy and maybe I could have handled myself differently, but the whole thing is how do you take an engagement and turn it into a win if a win is possible? And if there's already a win on the table, someone called us about a drunk driver guy. We want to get him off the street. Okay, let's let this be a win. Let's also let it be a double win because we're going to get this drunk guy out of here. And we're going to go on about our business. Thanks, fellas. I appreciate you calling. Always feel free to call us. We're going to do the right. Wow, that's a win,
Yep. That would have been a better win anyway, other than what you had,
Yeah.
But so Pete, just getting back to your podcast, can you kind of explain a little bit for the guests, for our listeners, about like what your format is and what type of guests and things that you bring on?
Sure. It's similar to this, it's two people having a conversation. I don't typically ask like, what's your background kind of questions. Nothing wrong with those, but that's just not what I do. Because I kind of I have uncommon access to these people, whoever they are, whatever they're doing. And so my job is to make them interesting, have a conversation. Sometimes I compare and contrast with my experience. A lot of times that happens, but sometimes my job is to shut up and let them just talk, and so it can be a lot of things. I had a lady on today she wrote a book and it's an art thief, forger kind of mystery thriller thing. And so we talked about that, but she's also a therapist. So we talked about therapy and interviewing people. So all these things wrapped up into this conversation. And we're trying to make her seem like she's an interesting person that we'd all want to know.
Right.
Like we're doing here. This would be a conversation at a bar, sitting at a high top and someone's leaning in.
Exactly.
Right? That's what I want to do. But I'm going to use my craft as a spy to say, hey, how do I ask questions that are going to allow you to talk a lot about what it is? And then I'm just going to look for spots to inject and play with time or expand a topic. And that's sort of how I approach the hosting thing. One of the things I do, there's a couple things I do that are really different is I'll bring other people that are experts in. And so like, let's say I brought in my cop friend and you and I were all going to talk about policing. Right. And so now we have a triple dynamic where we can really explore something. And sometimes I just back out of those and I just let the people talk because they can have a better conversation than I can because they're of that world. And so it can be a lot of things, but it's an hour long. We've done about 2,000 of them and they're wonderful. I've met the most amazing people and you know how this is, almost inevitably, we just stay friendly. They come back or, it might be 5 years later, they're like, hey, Pete, I wrote another book, or I'd love to come on and talk to this, or have you met so-and-so? You got to have them on your show. And so my show, a lot of times books itself, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing, especially with over, 2,000 episodes. That's a huge feat. If you look at some of the podcasts that are out there, a lot of people don't get even past 3 months, or 50 episodes, so to sit there and say you've got over 2,000 episodes and
it's
have,
ridiculous.
You've had Nobel Prize winners, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or nominees on the show. And so you've had all kinds of interesting guests on there. Is there any guests recently that just kind of stick out to you that you were like, man, this was really fun? I know it's hard for us as a host because I think everybody that we have is a favorite, but
it's always the next one, right? Yeah.
It is.
It's they're all so incredible, and I don't have like people want you to niche. And so like, listen, if you listen and you think about getting a podcasting, do what you want to do. You don't got to know what your niche is. And you don't have, if you want a niche. But if not, my niche is life. And so I do whatever I want to do, whatever interests me. And sometimes it's challenging. Like if it scares me, I'm like, oh, but my rule is, oh, that topic scares the shit out of me. I guess I'm going to have to do that. So I don't get to
Right.
bow out of things I'm afraid of. It's my job is to talk to these people and figure out how to do it. So like during all the chaos we had in 2020, I talked to people on every side of an issue. And it turns out folks are folks. And if you let folks be folks, they're folksy. And so you can get you don't have to like, you don't have to agree, but you do have to tolerate. And so we talk to people all the time on the show that are just fascinating people and from their point of view and everything. And it's fine. Here I am, 2,000 episodes later, notch on the political spectrum filled, talk to people from sports, like you said, Nobel Prize winners, Oscar winners, Grammy winners, all that stuff. I've got all of it. And my life is so rich for it. So even if no one watches, I kind of don't care because I have such a great time. I meet these wonderful people. It's amazing.
And you know what, Pete? It's the same for me because I meet folks like yourself where we have similarities, from what our past careers were. And I mean, look, both of us are now podcast hosts. I don't have a niche either. So
Yeah,
I'm kind of
good.
like you. I guess my niche is, I try to make it geared towards what I call normal, everyday people. And the idea is to take normal people like yourself, right? You were in the military, you're what we quote unquote normal, right?
Yeah, right.
And we tell your extraordinary stories. And that's what I think, people really love is to hear things that, either inspires them, gives them
Yes.
insight into an area that maybe they had, ideas in approaching, whatever it may be, writing, whatever. And I'm the same way. I want to have folks on. I want to share their stories. I want to get it out there. Like I said, I want to take normal people and share their extraordinary
Yeah.
stories to show others that, yes, we can better ourselves. And no matter where you are on a spectrum of life, you can complete something.
Yeah.
And
you
that's
really
my
can.
whole premise.
I love
And
it.
it sounds
It's a
like
great
that's kind of
premise.
yours too. I mean, even with the political aspects, and that was where I was going to go next, Pete, was how do you, approach sensitive and complex issues? Like even like I know one of the ones that I've seen was like the Ukraine-Russia conflict,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people in that world, and so I'm obligated to bring some of that insight because a lot of the stuff you see reported, like here's a classic example, like if when the Russians attacked Ukraine and you had reporters on the ground and they're like, boom, like, oh no, the bombs, like, no, okay,
Yeah.
so you're not a war reporter because war reporters don't do that. Like either
No,
you're
they don't.
seasoned and you know how to do the job or you're terrified. Look, I understand it's scary to be a war reporter, but there's a calm to being a professional in that job. And so when I see those things, I'm like, oh, can we get some real people here who work in this field, who have PhDs in it, who can talk about it, who can disagree with one another professionally, and really bring some insight? Because what'll happen is the traditional media will stoke fear. And so I don't do that. If anything, I deflate fear. Like if there's a potential for nuclear war, I'm like, no, okay, look, okay, yes, there's always potential for nuclear war.
Always.
Are we really going to do that? What happens? Okay, and so then you dive into that, and I get an expert on nuclear proliferation, and they talk about it. I'm like, this is a person does this for a living all day long. They've got a PhD in it, and so you can talk about something, and take someone's fear or their narrative that they've swallowed, and say, hey, you know what? Swallow this narrative too. See how you feel. I'll be in the morning. See if you're still upset. And I have a lot of my friends like, man, thanks for doing those shows like on, well, I don't know, when Donald Trump was talking to Kim Jong-un, right? And everybody was losing their mind. It's like, hey,
Oh, yeah.
calm down. This is what you do. This is why he's doing it. I don't care if you agree with him or not. I'm not putting up for any candidate.
No, you're just
But there
explaining
is, yeah, like you can't just run to the world is going to end.
Exactly. No,
But
and
if
it
it
seems,
is-
and you're absolutely right,
Yeah.
Pete. It's folks like you and other podcasts out there that really I think are bringing the real news to people today. Because you're right,
Right.
the mainstream media is so swayed to whatever they're, I don't know if it's the people that own the company that are trying to sway them to one side or the other,
Right.
or trying to
Right.
always instill fear on folks. That's one of the biggest things is the fear thing. It's like,
Right.
we're not going to give money to Ukraine, so now Ukraine's just going to collapse. And it's like, no, wait a second, that's not exactly true.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
the gaslighting essentially is
I'll
what
give you a good
the mainstream
example.
media.
When I hear things like we hear the word existential crisis, like that's a phrase everybody says. And I'm like, well, then we're like 23-0 and surviving those things. So
Exactly.
do we need to adjust what we think existential is? So we, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, there was a whole narrative about Monsanto. And I'm not justifying bad behavior. You always got to say that. But I'm like, I'm going to talk to Monsanto and see if they'll come on the show. And I'm like, look, I'm not trying to get you guys. I just want to hear your point of view, because all I ever hear is this negative stuff and GMOs and all this other stuff. And so we had a phone call, and they're like, obviously we can't talk about ongoing court cases. I'm like, I'm not interested in ongoing court cases because you can't talk about them. Oh, look at that. We agree. Okay. Well, can we talk? Like, I just want to know, like, what your guys' mission is, examples of it, that kind of thing. And they're like, we'd love to do that. And so they came on. They didn't limit any. Look, we weren't going to talk about court cases because there's no point. And we were going to like drink Roundup and all these other stunts that happen. Like, we're not doing any of that. We want to get to know you guys, right? And so they sent this guy, Ty. He came on the show, and he's like, look, we exist for farmers. We hire the best possible people we can, PhDs who are experts at agriculture. We can't get enough of these guys because the problems we get are almost unsolvable until we, the only company that does this, can do it. And we start with traditional agricultural tools to solve these problems. And as they graduate up the problem matrix, until we get to a point where we have to invent something, we invent something, because that's modern science. That's what we do, And so, look, do they have sharp elbows? Every company has sharp elbows. Of course, they've got to protect themselves and go to court. And some of that behavior is inexcusable. Okay, great. All that stuff aside. But farmers bring them problems, and farmers are trying to feed us. And so if you just throw away Monsanto, well, then you haven't done your work. And again, I'm not justifying any kind of like, they did this, they invented that. They want to make a better solution. Are they perfect at it? No. But who else is going to do that? Who else is going to employ all these agriculturists?
Yeah.
And so
that was
things.
Yeah. Hindsight is 20/20 always, right? When we go back and look at things, we can always see, maybe we shouldn't have done that or whatever. But the idea is things change, right? Like what we knew was right 20 years ago is no longer right today,
Right.
And because we evolved so much as a society, just with technology and everything else, that we could sit back and say, you know what, maybe that was a mistake to do, like one thing I think about is like, 70s, 80s, like cigarette ads, or even cigarette ads on TV. And then all of a sudden we're like, wait, you know what? Smoking's bad for you. So maybe we should take those off TV,
Right.
And it's like just things like that. And it's like, we didn't know any better beforehand, but now that we know something, that's where we got to take that step and move towards a better direction.
Yeah, and I think tobacco is a great example. I think we learned a lot about the bad side of corporations as they do that. Like, they have to justify their behavior. They got a lot of people sick and made their product more addictive, and those things are bad. And so you can't just throw something away based upon the narrative of somebody else. Like, you're obliged to look into it, or at least I am. And so then you can decide. So here's the funny thing. So I've got this guy, Charles C. Mann, and he's an investigative reporter, very, very, very smart guy. And we were talking about food systems because he's writing a series of articles. This is a current series I'm doing right now. And I told him my Monsanto story. He's like, I was invited to go to Monsanto. They let me look around. And I was talking about all these things you're talking about. And they were wonderful people there. They were brilliant. They were blowing me away with all the things they knew. So if you're telling me that a food company is going to hire the most brilliant people in agriculture in the world, and they're going to work on solving problems that allow us to feed all these people that don't have access to food, that have diseases and stuff that wipe out their crops. For us, that hasn't happened for ages now, right? Like decades and decades, 100 years. But these other places, that's not true. They're going to work on solving these problems. Well, I'm just going to get out of the way and let them solve those problems. And sure, there's going to be some negative things to that, but we got to feed people. And we can't just get mad at a company. And so, like, when I hear things like big oil, big ag, big fruit, all these things, I'm like, wait, you haven't done your work. I say those words too, by the way. But
we all do.
Things. Right.
Yeah.
And so you invite those people on your show. Sometimes they don't come. I was picking a big oil in my hometown, right here where I'm sitting. There's a refinery, and we went and talked to them. Great show. Well, their lawyers killed it. And I'm like, you guys are fools. You guys are fools.
Yeah.
You have this problem where people hate you because of what you are, not what you do.
Exactly.
Or
what the perceived or what the perception is that you are. Right. Because that's a lot of things too. You hear one bad thing in the media, and then all of a sudden, you have a negative view on a company, where in reality, like going back to smoking, like Philip Morris, right? The biggest manufacturer of cigarettes in the country, probably the world, but they also do other things.
Sure.
That come, like, they do things in health. They do things, they're all over the place. So it's like, just to sit there and say, we should just, get rid of Philip Morris. It's like, well, wait a second. You got to understand what they do,
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great point.
Yeah. And so that's one of the benefits of having a show like, like what we have, where you can go out and you can look into something. I'm going to have a fire expert on the show talking about fires, because you hear a lot of conflicting narratives from people. And I don't know what the answer is. So I just try to go to the source. And look, if I go to one source, I'll go to another one. I'll even have them on the same show and be like, help me sort this out, fellas or ladies or whatever it's going to be. How come these things conflict? What does that really mean? And then I sit back and they sort it out and they talk about it. It's amazing what you learn when you
Yeah,
let really smart people who are dedicated to this stuff. It's one thing to worry about the environment. It's another thing to go get a PhD in it and then get your
exactly.
arms, neck, get in it and do it, and then talk to that person. And they're like, so I'll give you an example. One of the Nobel Prize winners I've had on is a guy named Steve Running. He's a climatologist. He's like, oh, we can take all kinds of carbon. He's not a climate denier. So we can take all kinds of carbon in the climate. We don't want it, but the thing is, it's manageable. We can do things.
Hmm.
And there's all kinds of things that we try to do that actually make it worse, that we think are good, And so we was
Yeah,
talking about all this stuff, but a very practical dude. He's like, he lives in Missoula, Montana. He's like, I ride my bike to work, but you don't have to. Maybe you live 10 miles from work. I don't want you riding your bike to work. That's dumb. We can
yeah,
manage this. We can be smarter. Coal is already going down. All these consumptions are going down. Meanwhile, it's going up in China. We can't. So he would talk about the whole system of systems and say, look, pushing the button here, that's not going to fix anything. We just got to slowly shrink this big problem and improve how these systems work together. And then you get there. He's like, is that easy? Is anyone going to do it? Is it a political thing? Yeah, all of that stuff. It's super
all of it.
hard. So just continue to get better, and you're just going to get better. And he wasn't all that worried about it. And yet he's a climatologist, like, hey, it's
Yeah.
going to be pretty bad if we
Exactly. And,
don't deal with
and
this.
Pete, when it comes to things like that, I've always been in the same thing where, people talk about climate change and I don't deny that our climate has changed somewhat, right? I mean, we're seeing different weather patterns and stuff, but you're absolutely right. We could do everything and go completely carbon neutral in the United States. But if nobody else in the world does it, it's really not going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
there's all kinds of
So,
things, subtopics in there that you can get into.
oh,
And
yeah.
it really gets challenging because you start to realize how insignificant you like here in California. Like, we want to get rid of our gas stove. My gas stove is not anybody's problem. That doesn't
No,
do a thing. And it's not like,
no.
well, one starfish back in. No, 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 no. There's things we can actually do that would make a big difference. And if I want to get rid of my stove, okay, fine. But let's get these gigantic balls and move them over a little bit and be like, that problem is less now. Don't focus on me.
Exactly.
I'm not the problem.
And that's one of the things that I've sat there and always been one of my biggest complaints about our government is how they pick some of these things that affect like maybe 30% of the people, or like you said, like the
Yeah,
gas stove, right? And they say,
yeah,
the last administration said, we're not going to allow you to do any more gas appliances. The new administration comes in and says, no, forget that. We're going to let you do it. And it's like, is that really the most important thing facing our country today?
right.
Is gas
Yeah,
stoves?
yeah.
Because if it is, I wonder
It's
why I'm giving you all this money.
Yeah, totally. I would use this example before it became more political, but I would say like every Tesla that lights on fire is more consumption of carbon than the person who bought it could ever do by themselves. It's just true. Every time you
Hmm.
take the amount of energy it takes to put a cubic yard of concrete 80 feet in the air is more than I can ever do in my lifetime. Like all of the moving parts to get all of that stuff up in the air, 80 feet. And I don't mean like it's floating in the air, everybody, but
No,
like it's
no.
attached to,
Yeah.
and so that cubic yard, all the energy it takes. So do I need concrete up there? No, but is it part of having a train station or whatever? Oh, okay, great. But don't act like my shoes and my belt are a problem or my steak
Yeah,
dinner. That's not the
exactly.
problem. We have bigger things to do that actually make a difference,
And
and
would
we
make more
fire
of a
ourselves about
difference.
these things.
Yeah,
Right, right, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's like I think I was watching a show, I think a new show that came out on Paramount Network. It's called Landman. I don't know
sure.
if
Yeah,
you've
great
seen that.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I've not
he
seen it, but
talks
I
about
know the premise.
yeah.
Yeah,
In one scene he talks about they're out looking at wind turbines. And he says, he starts going into, you don't talk about the oil that went into the plastics that made it, or the oil that for the
yeah.
trucks to get it out here, or the oil for this and the oil for that. He goes, in its lifetime, in its 20-year lifetime, this one wind turbine will not regenerate as much energy as it used to make it.
Dynamics are a monster. It's really, really tough to make them work, right? Yeah. And that's true over and over again. So when you think a train is more efficient, well, what does it cost to build a wheel for a train? Well, how much energy? Oh boy, I don't know. A lot, because you got a lot of metal there, and you got to
A
pick that
lot.
metal up. You got to move it from here. You got to move it to every time you move that thing. That's a lot of
Yep.
carbon, right? And
A
then
lot.
you got to fix it. You got to pull it off that train. You got to put a dude in a truck to drive to where that train is, to pull that wheel off, to replace it with a machine and a crane. All of a sudden, you've got all this carbon. And it's really hard to make these things be more efficient. It's very, very, very difficult. So it's like 1% growth, 1% growth. And if you sustained that for 20 years, you'd be like one of the greatest people ever at like creating efficiency. And
Absolutely.
that's just the truth, right? And so we look at these things. For example, like a good landman kind of example is we import. So here in California, I was told recently that, oh, gas prices are high because we live on a gas island, you see. And I'm like, that person's standing a mile and a half from the Brea tar pits.
Mhm.
And people may not realize this, but there's all kinds of oil and energy in the ground in California. They used to have derricks on the beach in Southern California. And so don't tell me that there's not oil here, because there is. What we are doing is putting it on ships in Asia and Africa, and we're bringing it here, which pollutes more than all of the cars in America.
Yeah.
That sounds ridiculous when I say that, but it's true. They burn what's called bunker fuel, which is basically just oil straight out of the ground and dumped into this thing, and they just and they vomit it out. So all that energy to move that oil takes more than like all the cars. It's ridiculous. And there's like 20,000 ships at any given time burning some kind of polluting diesel fuel, basically what that is. And you're going to tell me that we shouldn't just do it here and build the most efficient, highest paying, safest, cleanest oil industry here? And I'm saying oil, natural gas.
Yeah.
We're not going to run out of helium. We have tons of helium. We just have to be allowed to go get it and then do a great job and get better and better and better and better and better at processing it.
And I think you're absolutely right there, Pete. That's the thing, is that people just want to say, no, we don't want to use crude oil anymore. And it's like, that's not the answer right now, because we've built an entire country off of crude oil, off of oil, so to speak. It's in everything,
Well,
everything that we're probably working on now.
Us.
Yeah.
That's fertilizer. It's medicine. It's everything.
The fact is, instead of us saying, well, we're not going to produce this, we should say, no, we are going to produce it, but we're going to do it in a way that's responsible, uses the best technology, has the best experts, to make sure it's the safest for the environment until we can get off of crude oil.
If we
That's
can,
what the goal should be. If we can. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think right now, if you were to look at it, I'd say we probably can't, but
you can't open your eyes and look at anything that's not impacted by our consumption of oil. I'm looking at a camera that's got plastic. I'm looking at a wall that's got paint. I'm looking at a mirror that has a Mylar film in it that comes from extraction. I mean, that's just the stuff in front of my face.
Yeah. So
this hat has oil in it.
To sit there and say, no, we're just going to get rid of oil. It's just not feasible. It's not realistic, And
this is why I'm rebranding oil. I'm rebranding it plant-based, natural, organic energy.
I like that. Natural, organic, plant-based energy. I love that, because that's what it is.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Pete, I want to switch gears just for a little bit,
Please.
because this is something that is important to me, and I think it's important to you, but PTSD and charity. And you do some work with a charity, don't you? That has to do with PTSD.
Yeah, I don't work with Save the Brave anymore, but I have done a lot of work with those guys, and I continue to look for ways to give back to my community. All things have their eras, and so there's nothing wrong with Save the Brave. They're awesome. They do great work, and I want to do different work now. And so we just have gone in a different direction. So it's not like a breakup. It's just evolution. But I mean, PTSD is a big deal, and we're trying to, it doesn't just belong to soldiers,
No.
Cops
Trust me, I know.
Firefighters get it. Ambulance people get it. Teachers get it. We all get it. So how do we deal with it? Now, for me, in my case, it was constant exposure to a lot of dangerous things. It wasn't one moment, right? But my buddy who he's retired now, but he retired less than 6 months ago. He ran a 911 center. And the last big nasty call they got was like days before he was going to retire. By the way, at that point, his brother had about 10 days left to live, because his brother dies immediately after this, right? In a wasp sting thing. But a car crashes, it causes a fire, and the phone calls the 911 center. And so what they get to hear, and he's got a rookie 911 response operator on, and they get to hear the mom and the baby burning to death. Yep. Yeah. And so they get to the scene. Brian, my buddy, he responds, because his job is, like, he runs the center, but he also is like, hey, is everybody here going to be all right? So he goes out to back up the main guy that does that, because they're looking out for these first responders to make sure, like, you've seen some horrific things today. What do we got to do? And as you know, there's a process. And so he goes there. That dude's vomiting. The guy who's like the professional at dealing with this. And so Brian was smart to go there. And that's every day in their world that stuff's available. Death and destruction and videos and people coming back. And so they get messed up. We don't realize how much that stuff is around all of us. And if you're not equipped to deal with it, and it's not easy, it's like going to the gym every day and working out. And that's how I stay mentally healthy, is I have these steps that I've built into my life. But I also know that I don't 100% control this thing. And so if it gets out of hand, people that have killed themselves have been on this path. I've
Yes.
managed to stop right here, but people go through that next gate, and I don't know how many gates I have in front of me before I end up there, right? And so this is not a cry for help,
Exactly.
but this is a reality of like, how do we take seriously how we care for ourselves if we're able? And I don't know that we can reliably do it with everybody. For me, I still have problems every day, but today I can manage them. But if I lose some mental capacity as I get older, maybe I won't be able to. Who knows?
See, that's what I worry about too. I deal with PTSD too from all the things that I've seen because, not only as a police officer for 13 years, but I worked as an EMT for 6 years,
Yeah,
and
you've
I
seen
worked
it
as
all.
a 911 dispatcher for 2.5 years, so
Right. Oh, you know
it's
all this work. Yeah.
it's there.
Right.
Oh yeah, I was
Yeah.
I was like, hey, just let me, I don't need any mental health, so let me just
Right.
do all these jobs. But one of the one things that I heard recently, Pete, was the average person in the United, and this is just talking United States, will have 2 to 4 traumatic instances within their lifetime. The average first responder has a minimum of 700.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's crazy over a 20-year career. So I mean, it's just absolutely crazy to think of that, to go from 2 to 4 and pick a job. And I'm going to lump in military with that because it's probably even more, especially those that have been in combat zones.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
to know what we've seen, and it's just not understandable, I don't think, for the normal folks that maybe don't have to deal with it quite like we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you build up a resistance to it, at least temporarily, right? And you can deal with it in some
Exactly.
way, right? But it still approaches you at night. We still go to the bottle to try to deal with it, and that leads to other problems. And so, yeah, I mean, there's still damage. And I always say, like, if you could see the damage on my skin that I've
Oh
taken
my gosh.
through
Yep.
PTSD, you'd be like, dude, sit down, relax. What are you doing? You're overdoing
Exactly.
it. Calm down,
Yeah, and I feel that exactly the same way, Pete, because it's like there's so much stuff, and sometimes, like you said, some days we have great days, and maybe it doesn't bother us as much, or maybe not at all. I don't know that I've really had one of those recently, but on other days
Right.
it can just
Yeah.
be an absolute nightmare. And I mean, it can just hit you out of nowhere.
Oh, it's
You
so
know?
horrible. Yeah.
It's, just for those folks that are out there, if you do suffer from PTSD or even think you might have it, I definitely encourage you to seek help because, it's not something that is meant to be dealt with alone. And the more you talk about it, the better it gets. And I'm just speaking about that from my experience, Pete, but
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
that's generally the overall, the more that we could talk about it and get some of these things out in the open, the better we are to deal with it instead of
And
just
I would,
locking it in like us men do, right? We
yeah. Oh
definitely
no,
lock that
please. Let's
stuff
just
in.
bury it down and never acknowledge it ever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what a
Like,
shovel was made for, to bury
I,
things.
I would do anything to not feel this way. Well, how about you go to therapy? Well, except for that.
Yeah, except for that, exactly. Welcome to us, to the mansplaining it to us, because
Yeah.
right, we're all
I love
tough
my
men.
friends that are like, I tried group therapy. I didn't like it. Did you try a different group? No.
Yeah.
Like, well, then
Did you
what are you
try
doing?
individual? I
Yeah.
mean,
Like,
there's all kinds of
did
stuff.
you, and here's the thing is like, I know these guys. And so I'm like, did you used to box? Yeah, I used to box. Wasn't for me. What'd you take up? Oh, I took up jujitsu. Did you do that stuff? No. Then I got into CrossFit. I'm like, do the same thing with your PTSD recovery. Just
Yeah,
keep trying them. Have an error. That's
exactly.
fine. But treat it like you're serious about it. And that's what gets them. They're like, what do you mean treat it like I'm serious? Of course I'm serious about it. Like, well, then why are you so
But are you?
soft? Why are you quitting?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't go to group therapy. All right, go get solo. There's all kinds of people. Go get a dog. Go
All
ride a
kinds.
horse.
Yep.
Go swim with
Go
dolphins.
see it instead of a
Yeah.
psychologist. See a psychiatrist. Whatever. Whatever works for
Right.
you. Try something.
Yeah.
Just don't
Yeah.
deal
Go.
with it on your own, because that's what ends up in that next. What we talked about, that next gate that might be the last
Right.
one.
Man, and one of my favorite things to say to him is do you swim? No, I don't swim. Like, well, if you swim, you don't got to go see a therapist. It's impossible to feel worse when you get out of a pool. It's mental health, it's physical health, it's everything. And so you're just too soft to go swim. That's all. You're a candy
Yeah.
ass, and take your eagle off your shirt. Get tough.
Exactly.
And, you
Exactly.
challenge them a little bit. And I'm being playful about it, but that is how hard it is to get someone to do it. Now, take someone who isn't from that world, and you're like, hey, yeah, it's tough being a mom, especially if you're the mom that responds to all the kids who get messed up things. There's PTSD in that. You're living on the edge of your capacity to do things, pushing beyond it, and putting yourself in a way where you're taking damage. You're living on cortisol, or you're living on adrenaline, or you're like, you're too empathetic. Like, you need to have a gate and be like, that's not my business. Not going to handle it. If you don't do that, then you take this damage that you don't need to take.
Exactly. No, that's a great point, Pete. Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
have said that better
Can
myself.
I say one more thing about PTSD before we get
Absolutely.
off that topic? If you worry about someone or if you love someone, talk to them, go out with them, engage with them. Don't ever ask someone who's hanging onto the rope, like the last bit of rope. Don't ever ask them to reach out and call you. They're hanging onto the goddamn rope. Call
Exactly.
those people. Go hang out. And you can't change their life, but you can enrich it. And so go out, talk to them, make time. Don't watch TV. Don't scroll. Go out and do all that stuff, but also go out and see people that you care about. Call someone, text someone that you love, and say, you know what? If no one else tells you today, you're a pretty good motherfucker. I love you. I think you're awesome. Here's the thing you taught me one time. Say something nice to someone so that if something does happen, you're not going to save anybody who's not savable. But if you at least engage, you're doing your part to make sure that you're present for them. And so that they know, like, if it's tough and they don't kind of, so if they do call you, they may not tell you. Maybe they just want to let a little blue air out of the balloon and get a
Yeah.
little more calm. You know, they
Yeah.
don't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm having nightmares again. You just talk to them. That's it.
Exactly. Exactly. And don't, I definitely, to build off of that, Pete, would say, don't offer solutions. Just listen.
Right.
If they want to
Yeah.
talk about it, just listen. And sometimes they might contact you and not talk about the issue, but just the
Totally.
fact that you're there is going to make a difference. It's
Right.
going to get
Because they
them out
just
of
need
that
to talk.
funk.
Yeah.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
with you 100%. So PTSD is a big thing for me. My father was a police officer for 25 years. He deals
Wow.
with it.
Yeah. Sure.
I've dealt with it. I have a bunch of friends that are, in the military that were in the Iraq, Afghanistan, wars. And so
Right.
it's such a big thing. And I think it's even more now after 9/11. Actually, Vietnam was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
what PTSD was. Actually, Pete, to tell you a story, my best man who passed away last year was a Vietnam veteran, which is funny because he was like 30 years older than me, but we
Yeah.
met working at a job and we just hit it off.
Yeah.
He was the same way, we would sit there at the bar, of course, because that's where men go, right, to talk
Right.
about their feelings is
Totally.
through
Yeah.
the bottom of a bottle. But,
Absolutely.
we'd sit there and talk at the bar and he would open up about some of the things that he's seen. And of course, he was a cop too. So that's how I met him.
Right.
So he's not only was Vietnam a bunch, but then, he had to deal with 30 years as a cop. But,
Sure.
I would
Yeah.
tell him all the time, I'm like, Mike, you got to talk about this stuff. And I say his name, but, Mike, you got to talk about this stuff. And are you going to the VA? And
Right.
he'd be like, no, I can afford my own medical. I go, no, it has nothing to do with about affordability. I was like, you earned that. That is your right
Yeah.
to go to the VA because
That's right.
especially for PTSD, they did nothing for you when you came back in 68, 69, when you came back home. And now here we are, what at the time was 2005,
Yeah.
so it's like,
Yeah.
go to the VA. Finally, he did, and he actually started getting better. So that's, advice to the veterans and stuff out there. If you
Yeah.
do have the VA available to you and you could get in, utilize it.
Oh, yeah. No,
know?
absolutely. Let me just echo that and maybe even make it harder. Go to the VA. One, you've earned it. It's a right you're entitled to. It doesn't matter if you can afford your own stuff. You don't have to take that care, but
Exactly.
get in, get registered, get rated, continue to, and if they underrate you, you know what you do? You keep asking, you keep working, and you treat it like it's going to the gym. And so when they're like, oh, but there's a lot of things, Nathan, there's a lot of things where like, oh, you went to this camp in Iraq? Oh yeah, everybody's automatic 50%. There's all kinds of poison in that dirt. We didn't know, right? And so you have to go in. And here's the other thing, and this is where you get the veterans. Veterans, listen, they won't budget it if you don't go spend it. So you have to go do that. And if you don't do it, the next veteran in line, you're letting them down because this is our system. And unless we work on this system within that system, it won't get better. It's a lot better than it was 10 years ago. As much as folks don't want to hear it, Donald Trump and Joe Biden improved the VA when they were both president the last 8 years. So you don't have to like that, but it's a fact. It's gotten easier. It's gotten better. It's gotten more reliable.
It has.
Is it still messed up? Yes, but better.
Absolutely. It's still a government-run entity, right? So we know it's not going to be perfect, but
right.
It's definitely there for you. And like you said, you could go back and get reevaluated and, maybe they get, up your percentage. And it's like, just at least try, it's there for you. Use it. Again, if you don't use it, they're not going to budget it. Yeah. And if they tell you no,
over and
okay,
over again, let them keep telling
right.
you no and just be like, no,
Absolutely.
I'm going to keep asking. Yeah.
Yep. No, I
It's a
agree
big
with you.
thing.
It's an asset that I think a lot of our veterans don't take advantage of, and I think it's probably because of the remarks of, oh, the VA doesn't work, it's never helped anybody, but in the end, it does help folks. And
It does.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've worked in healthcare since I've been outside of policing, and I worked I'm in Ohio, Pete, so I worked with the Cleveland Clinic. If you've ever heard of them, they're like the
Sure.
number one heart care in the country, but
Right.
I used to deal with the Veterans Administration all the time because they would, send people to the clinic for MRIs or things like that. And it's definitely better now than it was,
Sure.
20 years
Yeah.
ago for sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
when I'd hear veterans talk about, oh, I got to get an MRI because my back's broken, but I've waited 6 months. Now they tell me it's approved, but the approval went out yesterday, and I'm just like, oh,
Mhm.
so I would sit there and, be a voice for the veterans and say, I'm not hanging up this phone until you give me a new approval because this
Yeah.
guy's already been waiting 6 months with a broken back and he just needs a stupid
Yeah.
MRI,
I
so
know,
he can
right?
have his surgery.
And if you're like the kind of veteran who'd like to take care of troops, this is taking care of troops, even if it's taking care
Yeah.
of yourself, because you hold them accountable. Because if you don't, because they all talk internally about what needs to get improved, right? So we have to go out and do things. And so when I don't get my way, I throw that armor on and I'm like, listen, I'm about to get that ass. You know that, right?
Exactly.
Understand, like if you and I can't fix this, I am going to get this fixed. So here's your one shot to work with me on this. And if they're like, no, I really can't help you, I'm like, all right. And up to and including, listen, if we don't get this sorted out, I promise you, I will be on the 7th floor of the main building in Long Beach tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. And the first time the boss walks in the door, I'm going to be the first motherfucker he sees.
Yep.
So if you want me to do that, I absolutely will do that. Or, it's
Or
like,
let's work
and they're
together on
like,
this, right?
yeah, I'm like, I promise you I will do that. And I have done it before. And they're like, oh, fuck this motherfucker. But that's what you have to do, right? Because the system doesn't want to say no to you, except for when it does. And then you're like, listen, and I just have a thing. This is Pete's policy. I don't take your no, because like I love when the VA tells me, some of the VA is like, oh, well, that's expensive. Well, if you got that, well, how would everybody would get it? I'm like, that's not my problem.
Yeah. That's
My
no.
problem was ruck up and go out that gate. I did my job. Your job is to make sure that you can care for me now that my back is broken and my left, whatever, my heart is down. All
Exactly.
these things that happen, that's for you guys to sort out. Not my job to go raise your money for you.
Yeah. And
My
I
job is to
never
get care.
understood too, like with them saying, oh, well, this is very costly. It's like, doesn't matter.
Yeah. So
Our
what?
veterans
Yeah.
have already done the duty
Yeah.
to this country. I don't care how much that's like the one thing as a taxpayer I don't mind paying
Yeah.
taxes on.
Just go appropriate more. You'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, the VA is something, and for our veterans, I mean, for yourself, Pete, for all the years that you put in, I thank you for your service.
Well,
I
thank
thank
you. I
all our
appreciate it.
veterans for service. It's the right, like in Wisconsin today, they're having an election for Supreme Court Justice for Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, and it's like that right was brought to you by veterans that went before us.
That's right.
And so thank
That's
you
right.
for
Yeah.
exercising that right. And if you didn't, you should rethink it, because we've had a lot of men and women die just for us to have the right to do that.
Man, yeah, that's true. And that includes using the VA. We have had a lot of people
Exactly.
die. So go use that thing so that it gets better, because it doesn't get better if we neglect it. So
Absolutely.
that's just
And I've
that's
never
just my
heard,
soapbox.
I'm sure there's people out there, but I've never heard other fellow taxpayers say, boy, I wish we didn't have to pay for the VA. I think everybody's quite the opposite in saying, yeah, I wish the VA was better for our veterans,
Well, if we get the VA figured out, we can get medical care like that for everybody, but you
yeah.
wouldn't want this medical care yet. We got to get it better.
Not yet. We're still working on it. It's like you said, little steps, little bits at a time is what
Little
makes us
bits.
win and get things to the better, And like you
Hopefully,
said,
yeah.
over 20 years, if we do 1%, that's a 20% improvement.
Totally. Yeah.
It's
And it
better than
compounds.
nothing.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Pete, I don't want to take too much time, but what do you have going on next? Any new projects or anything up new for bids?
The biggest thing that BIDS does is it connects me to amazing people who have amazing stories. And so I'm turning into basically a documentary and a filmmaker. And because I get to know people, and what they don't have access to are the other side of the equation. And I know those people, so directors and producers and musicians. And so turns out I know a lot of people. And so I'm like, hey, here's a story. Or someone will say to me on the other side, the producer side, like, hey, Pete, you got anything on this? Yes, I do. And so I can connect that person. And look, because you can go to Hollywood with the book and you get the tour and nothing happens because you're just competing with 100 people.
Exactly.
And they're not even going to say no to any of them. Maybe they say yes to one, right? And so that doesn't really reliably work. But if you know people on the inside that are already making things, looking for the next thing to make, want to make something that's different, well, and so that's sort of what I'm doing now is I'm trying to build bridges to all these different ways to make things. And as people get to know me, they're like, Pete has good taste. Pete has good access. How do we turn that into a project? And so that's
Yeah.
what my show is creating for me, is opportunities to make bigger projects. And it's blowing my mind, some of the stuff I get to work on. And it's like my show, it's all so different. And so I'm sitting in a town where one of the most famous fights in early prize fighting history, one of probably the most oldest known fight. And it happened here in this town. And so we're going to make a movie about it. And I don't know how we're going to get the money, and I don't know how we're going to do everything, but right now we're working on the initial stuff. Like, we don't even need sand to make bricks. We have bricks. And now the bricks are going into a wall. And pretty soon I'm going to show my wall to somebody, like, look at that wall. You want to buy some more bricks? And they're going to say yes, because this story is incredible. And we've done the work to make it incredible, make it marketable. And that's what I'm doing now, is just making these movies.
That's awesome. And that's amazing to go from a podcast, right? Where, I don't know if you started as just like for me, it's like a hobby. Right now it's a hobby, and it's growing, which is a great thing. But to go from, a hobby to now making movies, even if it's still a hobby, that's still awesome. To have that much information that you can sit there and put in a movie, and especially something that's local to you, right?
Yeah. Oh man, it's incredible. I can't believe it. I'm so fortunate. And even if this idea doesn't work out, and here's the thing you realize when you're doing these things, if I don't make this thing, maybe nobody ever makes it. Like I am uniquely positioned to be, nobody's going to have a better shot than me at making this thing for the foreseeable future. So I better not waste this shot. I better work hard. I better do like I did before. Like, I'll work as hard as I have to do. I'll meet the right people, and I'll make the relationships happen, and I'll find the money. And if I don't, and if I can't find the person that can, well, then it's on me. And I don't mind failing that way, because it's on me. But it's not on somebody else telling me what I can and can't do. I've got to just go out and I got to build that project. And so far, we just keep going forward. And it's slow and it's ponderous. But the thing is every movie is a miracle. And when you accept that and you're like, this movie may die, I'm pouring my heart into it because you have to, but it may not work out. And then if it doesn't, okay, great. And you go on to the next one, or you revive this one, or whatever it is.
And the nice thing, though, is at least you can say, you know what, I tried, I gave it my all, and at the end of it, if it doesn't work out, like you said, Pete, you can only control what's in your control. So as long as you put 100%, which after talking to you today, I'm sure you're going to.
Yeah.
Or probably 140%, the Pete Turner way. But it's pretty cool that you could do that, because, and just like you said, and I'm just going to paraphrase here, but things, anything worth doing is going to take a lot of work.
For sure.
And that's where you're at. And you're taking that opportunity, and you're realizing the right time, and you just gotta, for lack of a better term, grab it by the balls and run with it.
Yeah, why not?
Exactly. Because
that's how
and
it's
like you
supposed to
said,
be.
if you don't, who will?
Who will?
Maybe somebody will, but probably not in our lifetime, most likely.
Oh, and if they did, it would break my heart. I'd be like, why didn't I try a little harder? So yeah. But that's what I'm doing,
exactly.
Man. It's great. And if people want to watch a Break It Down show, that's awesome. We do all kinds of stuff. As you can tell, we talk about a lot of topics. But, the real value now is coming. Look, the show continues to grow for me too, right? And bring in a little bit more money. But I don't have enough money coming in that it justifies the work. But the value of meeting you and somebody, all these other people, the value is there. And when I can connect two people and they work on a project, and they pay me, sometimes like people to send me a check, they're like, you did this for us. So I'm planting seeds all the time. And this is what I'm telling to any kind of podcaster. Don't limit what your show can become, because it can be something that you could never imagine. And most likely, if you stick at it, it will become something you couldn't have imagined or thought of, because it will take you in a different direction. My show is, in so many ways, is bigger than me. And so I've just let my show become something. And it's not easy. It's not comfortable, but
no,
it has
I
become something.
can vouch for that.
Yeah, and it's scary. And I'm like, I should just go get a job working for the post office, or something like that.
Exactly.
But the reality is I don't want to do that. And this is what my friends tell me, and this is good advice for anybody. I see you working hard. I know it's hard. Don't you dare quit, because we'd all want to be you. We all want to be you, and the freedom that you have, the experiences you get to have. Don't you ever quit. And then I tell them, well, then pay me $20 a month so I don't have so much money worries.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they're like, all right. Or they'll say, what, anytime you come to town, I'll buy you a meal, or whatever it is, right? And so they'll lean back with me on the problem, but it's my job to not quit. And the same thing for you. Like, you have the same task.
Exactly.
Don't you dare quit. Keep
And you
going.
know what? Just from where my show began, because I had this idea that I'm just going to start talking about things. Like I started with just the Constitution, going through the
Mhm.
Constitution, giving a little feedback to myself. And then I went to a
Yeah.
podcast convention in Florida, and that just kicked off this whole guest thing. And I joined Podmatch. Next thing you know, I've got guests lined up through next year's. It's like it's just grown so much, and it's such a thing. And you're right. I don't make hardly any money off of this, not enough to
Right.
institute what I put into it.
Right.
But like you said, it's a love because of the people that I get to meet, the different viewpoints that I have. Like, I'm just like you. I want to invite people on that have different viewpoints that I do. And maybe
For
we'll
sure.
have a good conversation back and forth. But the idea is I know I'm not right. And I know that I can't make the best decisions for myself if I don't have the views from both, from every angle that I can get, just like what you're doing with bids,
Yeah.
and
Thanks,
I'm
man.
not quite like you where, as far as, getting those PhD folks and all those experts in, but I do like to have a nice balance to show everybody that, all these different things, no matter what our opinions are, especially when it comes to politics, we have so much more in common than we don't, that we
100%
just
true.
need
All
to,
over the world, that's true.
exactly. And my biggest thing here with what I've been talking to a lot of my guests about is I would love to see our country, the United States, kind of get back to the way it used to be, where we'd have, while there's Democrats and Republicans, our big things, they used to work together a little bit more than they do
Yeah.
now, and
Yeah.
I'd love to see things start getting done. Like we talked about the VA. They have totally in their power in Congress to fix the VA. They could give the funds, the people, whatever, but they won't work together. And that to me is something that regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, you should be wanting to get together and work on that. But
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's
that's
all
my
true.
my message for everybody is we're all human beings. Let's just treat each other like it.
Hell yeah.
And there you have it, folks. Another incredible episode of Just a Dude podcast in the books. Pete Turner, your stories, your insights, and your dedication to making a difference truly resonates with us. We've journeyed from the intensity of combat zones to the intimacy of healing through storytelling, and I must say, it's been enlightening. Thank you, Pete, for sharing your journey with us, for your service, and for continuing to serve through your podcast and charitable work. To our listeners, if this episode inspires you, don't forget to check out the Break It Down show. Remember, every episode here at Just a Dude podcast is about celebrating the human spirit, and today we've seen it in its most resilient form. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep being just a dude or a dudette making a difference. I'm Nathan, signing off. But don't go too far. We've got more stories to tell soon. Take care, stay curious, and as always, stay human.